Chapter 11, The Test of Fire. The gate looked like nothing. That was the first thing Alira noticed, and it unnerved her more than any visible mechanism could have. Just an archway cut into the raw basalt of Holloway's lower underbelly, wide enough for two people to walk through shoulder to shoulder. No lock, no visible sensor array, no guard standing post. The stone was dark and slightly damp, and the air around it smelled of mineral cold and something else underneath, something almost sweet, like copper left out too long. The kind of smell her lab carried after a cascade discharge. Memory-saturated air. She stopped 2 meters short of it. Myra stopped beside her, close enough that Alira could feel the warmth radiating off the girl's arm in the cold.
You feel that?
Myra said, very low. Not a whisper exactly, more like the register you used when you didn't want something to hear you.
The resonance field, yes.
Alira kept her voice level. She studied the arch. Nothing moved.
It's passive state, like a thermometer, not a lock. It doesn't stop you, it reads you, and whatever reads you determines whether it signals the interior.
So if it reads wrong...
They know we're here before we're 2 steps inside.
Myra exhaled through her nose. She had a habit of doing that when she was calculating something. Alira had noticed that small, measured breath, the way her eyes went slightly unfocused, like she was listening to something inside herself.
What state does it want?
I don't know exactly. The Unburdened designed their threshold sensors around emotional purity, single affect, high saturation, grief, peace, resignation, something uncomplicated, uncatengerian.
Because complicated means you're hiding something.
Because complicated means you're thinking.
Alira said.
And thinking means you're not one of them.
Myra turned to look at her fully. The violet tides had shifted in the past hour, and the bioluminescent moss that clung to Holloway's stone walls pulsed in slow waves of blue-green, making the light move like water across both their faces. It made Myra look younger. It made Alira feel older.
What can you hold?
Myra asked. The question was practical, not unkind, but it landed with weight. Alira looked back at the arch.
I don't know.
Pick something. Something clean.
Clean. The word felt like a small cruelty. Her interior life was anything but. Grief had lived in her for 5 years now, but it wasn't simple grief. It came tangled with guilt and the specific horror of having caused the wound yourself, and underneath that was love, and underneath the love was rage, and underneath everything was Sienna. Sienna at 7, not vanished but simply 8 years old and impossible, singing in the lab while Alira worked, getting the words wrong to songs she'd half-learned, not caring at all. But that last part, that might be clean enough, the love before the fear.
I'll hold her.
Alira said quietly.
Before, not after. Her laughing.
Myra nodded. Her jaw moved slightly, like she was tasting something, deciding on it.
My brother. The way he looks when he's asleep and not hurting.
They stood there a moment longer. The moss pulsed. Something in the stone of the arch seemed to breathe, though nothing stirred.
We need to synchronize.
Alira said.
That's the harder part. If we enter with 2 distinct emotional signatures, the sensor catches the dissonance.
She paused.
I've never actually done this.
Fantastic.
Myra said, but not bitterly. Almost dry, the way someone says it when they're trying not to let themselves feel how afraid they are. Alira turned to face her.
Have you synchronized resonance with someone else?
Not on purpose.
What's it like when it happens accidentally?
Myra chewed the inside of her cheek.
Like someone else's heartbeat coming in under yours. You start matching it without deciding to.
Then we need to start that, now, before we move.
Myra looked at the ground between them, then back up.
You have to actually feel it, Dr. Voss. Not analyze it. You can't think at the gate.
I know.
I'm serious. I've seen you think your way through everything since we met. If you're standing there cataloging the resonance topology...
I said I know.
The words came out more sharply than Alira intended. She softened them.
I know. I'll try.
They faced each other squarely in front of the arch. Two women, very different, equally afraid. Alira was aware of the absurdity of the posture, like some esoteric breathing exercise she'd have dismissed as pseudoscience 6 months ago. But she thought of Sienna's voice in that corrupted crystal. "Don't let them forget me." And she found the laughing girl without much effort. Sienna, maybe 5 years old, lying on the lab floor on her back while Alira worked late. Arms spread like she'd fallen from somewhere wonderful, looking up at the filtered violet sky through the ceiling panel and just laughing for no reason. Laughing because she was 5 and the sky was beautiful and her mother was nearby. That kind of laughing. The memory did not come with pain this time. That surprised her. It came with warmth that moved up through her sternum like something thawing, something she'd kept in cold storage so long she'd forgotten it had heat in it. Beside her, Myra's breathing slowed, evened. Alira kept her eyes on Myra's face without focusing on it. She was not watching, she was feeling. She let the warmth expand. She felt something at the edge of her own sensation, a secondary rhythm not quite hers. A little faster, a little rougher, but settling. The way a struck string finds the note a moment after the pluck. Myra's eyes closed. Alira closed hers. Jem asleep and not hurting. Sienna laughing on the floor. Two children who needed protecting, and two people who had not managed to protect them, and the love underneath the failure, the part that survived everything. That part was the same. That part was almost exactly the same. Neither of them moved. Alira felt the synchronization happen the way you feel a key click in a lock. Not loud, not dramatic, just the small, satisfying release of two things finding alignment. The warmth between them became a single warmth. Their breathing matched, 3 breaths, 4. She opened her eyes. Myra opened hers.
Now.
Myra said. They walked through the arch together, and the stone didn't breathe, and nothing sounded, and the air on the other side smelled exactly the same as the air before. Alira kept walking. Her pulse was very loud in her ears. 10 steps, 12, 15. No alarm. No guards materializing from the walls. No signal cry echoing up through the corridor ahead. Myra let out the breath she'd been holding in one long, quiet stream.
It worked.
Alira did not respond right away. She was still carrying Sienna. She was afraid that if she spoke, the warmth would fracture, and she was not ready to be cold again.
It worked.
She finally agreed, but her hands, she noticed, were shaking. The corridor beyond the arch was low-ceilinged and black, lit only by thin filaments of bioluminescent cables strung along the walls at knee height. The light was wrong for moving fast. It illuminated the floor and nothing else, so that Alira's hands disappeared into shadow above her waist, and the walls existed only as a pressure of darkness on either side. Myra moved ahead of her, which was right. Myra had done this before, had navigated spaces built to disorient. She moved with her shoulders pulled in and her steps light, heel to toe, not quite soundless but close. Alira followed, trying to copy the gait and knowing she was doing it badly. The outpost's interior was not what she'd imagined. She had pictured something institutional, filing systems, storage racks, the cold efficiency of people who believed what they were doing was clinical work. Instead, it felt unfinished, like someone had commandeered a space without planning to stay. The walls were raw basalt scored with what looked like circuit work but wasn't. They were memory conduit grooves, channels designed to carry resonance through stone rather than wire. She recognized the design. She had drawn something like it herself years ago in a notebook she still had somewhere, a notebook from before. Stop. Not now, 20 meters. 30. The corridor bent left, then right. The air grew warmer and carried a distinct smell, hot crystal and something organic underneath it, like the moment just before a memory was purified, that brief window when a person's entire emotional signature hung unsettled in the air. The smell of accumulation. Dozens of memory events concentrated in a single space. Myra held up her fist and stopped. Alira stopped behind her. She could hear it now. Voices, 2 of them, neither hurried, the particular flat cadence of people doing routine work in a place where nothing exciting usually happened. Myra angled her head back and breathed the words directly into Alira's ear.
Storage room. 2 enforcers on rotation. We go left at the junction. We can avoid them entirely.
Alira nodded against her shoulder. They moved again. The junction came up faster than Alira expected, and she caught the edge of the left corridor with her shoulder, stones scraping the fabric of her jacket. Both of them froze. The voices in the storage room continued without pause. She exhaled slowly. Left corridor. Another 40 meters. Then Myra stopped again, but this time it wasn't caution that stopped her. She pulled up short so fast that Alira nearly walked into her back, and when Alira looked over her shoulder, she understood why. The vault door was open. It should not have been open. Alira had spent 2 days studying the outpost's layout from the outside, every piece of intelligence she'd managed to pull from black market schematics, and every version had the vault sealed with a dual resonance lock requiring 2 administrators. Sealed vaults did not open themselves at night without people inside them. Myra was already processing this. She could tell from the stillness that came over the girl, that listening quality she got when her ability was reading something the rest of her hadn't caught up to yet.
Someone's already in there.
Myra said, barely voiced.
Kieran's people?
I don't know. It's not empty, though. It feels
She stopped.
full, like a lot of crystals very close together.
They shared a look in the bad light. The vault was 15 meters ahead. Going back meant the corridor, the junction, the 2 enforcers. Going forward meant not knowing. They went forward. The vault was the size of a large room, and it was, in fact, full. Floor-to-ceiling racks lined 3 walls, and on every rack sat crystal after crystal in individual resonance cradles, each one slightly phosphorescent in its own key, so that the whole space breathed with dim shifting color, amber and ice blue and deep rose, and the occasional flare of something warmer. The smell was overwhelming in here. Alira's eyes went wet from it immediately, not from emotion, but from saturation, the way your body reacted to a room where too many people's most vivid moments had been distilled and kept. In the center of the room stood a small work table, and on the work table sat a corrupted crystal in an analysis cradle. Alira moved toward it without deciding to. It was the color of old bone with threads of gold running through it, irregular, broken, like cracks that had been filled imperfectly with light. But the gold was warm. She could feel the warmth from half a meter away, a radiation that was not heat exactly, but something that registered in the same part of the brain, the part that recognized safety and presence and the specific weight of something that mattered.
That's her.
Alira said. Myra was beside her.
You're sure?
I'm sure.
She reached for the cradle release. That was when the lights came on. Not the thin floor cables, something above, full spectrum white that flooded the space and made everything in the vault snap into sharp relief, every crystal suddenly a hard point of color, too vivid, too much at once. Alira flinched away from it. Myra spun toward the door. 3 enforcers in the doorway, not the patrol she'd known about. Different ones, and they'd been waiting. One was already reaching for the extraction baton at his hip, a thick-handled device that discharged resonance interference. It didn't wound exactly, it disoriented. It scrambled sensory coherence for several seconds, and that was enough. The other 2 had their hands on the secondary vault door, pulling it inward, sealing them in.
Don't touch the cradle.
The one with the baton said. His voice was very calm. The calm of someone who had done this before and found it unremarkable.
Step back from the table.
Alira did not step back. Her hands were on the cradle release, her fingers had already found the pressure points by feel, and she knew how long it would take. 4 seconds to pop the lock, 6 to extract the crystal safely. She needed 10 seconds she did not have. Myra stepped in front of her. It was not a dramatic gesture. She didn't announce it or posture. She simply moved so that her body was between Alira and the lead enforcer, and the movement was so quiet and so certain that, for a moment, nobody reacted, as though the room itself needed a beat to catch up.
The crystal is corrupted.
Myra said. Her voice had changed from what Alira knew of it. The rasp was there, but the warmth was gone, and what replaced it was flat and careful, the voice of someone choosing each word the way you chose footholds on bad stone.
Corrupted crystals are Category 3 hazard material. Handling one without the appropriate dampeners violates Kieran's own storage protocols, so you might want to think about whether you actually want to trigger it.
Back away from the table.
The enforcer hadn't moved, but he'd stopped reaching for the baton, working it out whether she was bluffing. She was bluffing. Alira knew it. Myra had no dampeners. She had her hands and her ability and nothing else.
Last chance.
The enforcer said, and he was done thinking about it. He raised the baton. The other two moved away from the door into the vault, spreading out to either side. Tactical. Someone had trained them. Myra's hands came up at her sides, not raised in surrender, but open, palms forward, fingers spread, and something happened to her face. The flatness went out of it and something else came in, something Alira had no word for, not pain exactly, but the shape that came just before pain, the last moment before it arrived. Alira was 6 seconds into the cradle release. 7. What happened next she felt before she heard. A vibration started at the base of her skull, low and wrong, the frequency that preceded nausea or a bad fall, the body's alarm before the mind caught up. Then a sound that was not a sound exactly, but pressed against her eardrums like one, vast and concentrated and pointed, a scream that had no air in it, a scream distilled to pure frequency and pushed outward from somewhere inside Myra like light through a crack. The lead enforcer dropped the baton. He dropped it and then he dropped, his knees going first, and the look on his face before he caught himself on the nearest rack was not physical pain. It was something else, recognition of something he could not explain, a grief that had arrived without his permission. The one on the left stumbled sideways into the wall. The one on the right pressed both hands over his ears, a useless instinct because the frequency was not coming in through the ears. It was arriving directly, bypassing the physical architecture of the body entirely. Myra stood with her arms still out, and her face still doing that thing, that not quite pain, and the scream that wasn't a sound continued to pour out of her, and Alira recognized it now, felt the edges of it even through whatever protection her clinical exposure gave her. It was Lyra. Curran's sister, the girl from the Cascade in the Outpost file, the girl who had died in a memory flood. She had never heard that name spoken aloud, but the crystal's resonance from 3 days ago had carried a signature, and now Myra was holding it open, holding a dead girl's worst moment, her final full terrified alive second, and pushing it into 3 people's nervous systems without asking. 10 seconds. The cradle released. Alira had the crystal in her hand. It was warm, it was gold-threaded, it was heavy in a way that had nothing to do with mass. She closed her fist around it and did not look at it, could not look at it, not now.
Mira,
She said.
Mira, we have to go.
The scream cut out. The silence after it was physical. The kind of silence that has texture that you can feel against your skin. Myra's arms dropped. Her legs were shaking. Alira could see it from here, the fine tremor moving up from her calves through her whole frame, the aftermath of something that had used her as a conduit and left a mark. Her eyes were wet. She hadn't cried. Her eyes were wet because of the frequency, the same way Alira's eyes had gone wet from the saturation smell, the body doing its best to protect itself against something it had no category for. The 3 enforcers were not unconscious. They were down, but they were moving, one already getting his hands under him, pushing up slowly, the way a man moves when he's drunk or concussed, when the world's geometry has stopped cooperating.
Mira.
Alira crossed the space between them and put her free hand on the girl's arm.
Now. We need to move now.
Myra turned to look at her. Her face was strange. Not empty, not closed. Something worse. Open. Wide open in a way Alira suspected she never allowed herself to be.
She was terrified.
Myra said.
At the end, she didn't understand.
I know.
I used that. I pushed that into them.
I know. It worked. Come on.
They moved. Alira kept her hand on Myra's arm through the doorway and into the corridor, and Myra moved with her but not entirely present, some part of her still in the frequency she'd opened, still holding the door to something she'd never held before. Behind them, the outpost shuddered. It started as a vibration in the floor, the familiar warning signature of a gravity fluctuation, but different in character from the standard tide shifts Alira had spent her life calibrating to. This was local. Focused, the kind of gravity disruption that happened when a resonance event had been strong enough to briefly disrupt the magnetic suspension arrays that kept these structures airborne. The cascade recall of Lyra's scream hadn't just knocked 3 people down. It had hit the outpost's infrastructure like a hammer to a tuning fork. The floor tilted 3 degrees. Equipment slid somewhere to their right. Something ceramic shattered. The bioluminescent cables on the floor went dark, then pulsed back in emergency red, a color Alira had never seen them use and didn't like.
Faster.
She said, and this time she wasn't leading Myra. They were running together and the floor tilted another degree, and ahead of them the corridor looked subtly wrong. The walls at an angle that was not the walls but the whole island listing. The outpost losing its equilibrium with the kind of slow, terrible momentum that once started did not easily stop. The junction. Left, then forward, then the arch. The arch was passive, it didn't need to read them going out. She hoped. The low-light cables strobed red-dark red as they hit the junction, and from behind them she could hear shouting now, the 2 patrol enforcers from the storage room finally mobilized, and further back the sound of the vault door grinding against a frame that was no longer level. 20 meters to the arch. 15. The floor pitched and Alira's shoulder hit the wall and she kept her fist closed around the crystal, protected it at the cost of balance, her free hand slapping stone, and Myra caught her elbow and pulled her upright without slowing. 10 meters. The shouting behind them resolved into words. Something about containment, something about sealing the external exit, and then that sentence stopped mattering because they were through the arch and out into the open, cold underbelly of Holloway. And the rock was solid underfoot, real gravity now, the island's gravity instead of the outpost's compromised field. And the violet tide had shifted again, while they were inside, so the sky was a deeper purple now. The bioluminescent moss along the cliff faces poolsing amber in the new frequency. They ran another 100 meters before Myra stopped, grabbed a stone ledge, and bent double. Alira stopped beside her. Her lungs ached. The crystal in her fist was warm enough now that she could feel it through the skin of her palm, a gentle, insistent pulse like a slow heartbeat. She did not open her hand. She was not ready. Myra was not catching her breath. She was holding her own forearms and staring at the stone beneath her, and the tremor that had started in her legs in the vault was still there, still working upward, still moving through her like a frequency not yet spent.
She didn't know what was happening.
Myra said again.
Lyra, in the memory, she was just scared.
Yes.
And I put that into people. I made them feel that. On purpose.
She looked up, not at Alira specifically but at the space near her, working something out.
I made it a weapon.
Alira did not have a clean answer for this. She knew the shape of the feeling Myra was describing, the particular nausea of having used something precious for a function it was not meant for. She had felt it the first time she'd harvested a memory without the subject's full understanding. 20 years ago, a small compromise that at the time seemed like pragmatism and in retrospect had been the first step on a very long slope.
You stopped them.
Alira said finally.
We got out, the crystal.
She stopped, swallowed.
What you did matters.
That's not what I asked.
Myra straightened up. She had gotten some of herself back. Alira could see it, the self-possession returning like color to a face after shock. But something underneath it was different now, some quality in her eyes that had not been there before. Not hardness, the opposite of hardness. The rawness of a person who has discovered what they are capable of and is not sure yet how to hold it.
I'm not asking if it was worth it. I know it was worth it. I'm asking what I am.
The amber moss pulsed. Above them, somewhere in the guts of the outpost they just fled, something structural gave way with a sound like a held note breaking, and a portion of the platform's outer facing separated and fell downward into the dark below, tumbling away into the stratospheric deep. Alira looked at the girl in front of her. At the wet-cornered eyes and the still trembling hands and the rasp in her breathing that had nothing to do with the dust now. She opened her fist and looked at the crystal for the first time. Gold-threaded, old-bone white, warm as held skin. Sienna. She closed her hand again.
I don't know what you are.
Alira said.
I think you might be something we don't have a name for yet.
She said it as carefully as she knew how, trying not to make it a compliment, trying to make it exactly what it was. True.
But you're the reason we still have this.
Myra looked at the closed fist. She nodded once, slow. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, not embarrassed, just practical.
Okay.
She said.
Okay.
She looked out at the violet dark, and the falling debris and the amber-breathing walls.
We should get off this ledge before the whole thing comes down.
Yes.
They moved, but Alira kept thinking about the look on Myra's face in the vault just before the frequency left her, just after she'd done the thing she'd never done on purpose before. She'd looked like someone taking the first step into very cold water. Not stopping, not refusing, just bracing for what it cost.